Welcome back to our channel today. We're truly thankful for every view, every comment. Each one means the world. So tell us, where are you watching from today? Drop your city or country below. We love hearing from our global community. Now let's dive in. Chapter 1. The Self-Made Man. The moment Dominic Reeves saw Vanessa Porter, something shifted. Her smile didn't just light up the room, it ignited it. And her laugh? Infectious. Impossible to ignore. They met at a charity gala in Boston. Dominic was representing his budding security firm, while Vanessa was coordinating the event. He wasn't born into the world that hosted such galas. Raised by a single mother in a working-class Philadelphia neighborhood, Dominic had fought for every inch of his success. After serving in special forces, he used his military savings to launch Reeves EC, a boutique firm catering to high-net-worth clients. By 32, his one-man hustle had become a respected name across New England. "You don't look like the usual trust fund crowd," Vanessa had said that night, studying him with sharp hazel eyes. "That's because I built everything with these hands," he answered, rough palms bearing silent proof. 6 months later, they were married. Vanessa said it was his focus she fell for, his relentless drive. "When you want something, you don't stop until it's yours," she whispered on their wedding night. "It's terrifying and thrilling." Those first years were golden. Reeves EC thrived. Then came the twins, Abigail and Noah. Dominic bought them a colonial home in a quiet Boston suburb. Not flashy, not enormous, but solid, earned. He remembered carrying Vanessa over the threshold, her laughter bouncing off the bare walls. "This is just the beginning," he'd promised her. "Give me 10 years, and I'll give you the world." Then Bryant Walsh entered their lives. The twins were 7. Walsh was a slick financial advisor, perfect suits, too white smile, a walking billboard for luxury. Vanessa had met him through her new friends at the country club. With the business booming, Dominic needed financial guidance. "You handle protection," Bryant had said smoothly. "Let me grow your wealth." Vanessa had been instantly taken. "He works with the Aldridge family." She kept repeating, the name carrying weight. The Aldridges were Boston royalty. But something about Walsh rubbed Dominic the wrong way. Maybe it was the way his eyes lingered on Vanessa, or how every sentence seemed to hinge on money, as if success meant nothing without extravagance. Dominic hesitated, but Vanessa had been persuasive. "Don't you want more for the kids?" "For us?" she asked. "Bryant can turn money into a future." Reluctantly, Dominic agreed, and that moment would haunt him. As Reeves EC grew, so did the space between him and Vanessa. The signs came slowly, subtle shifts. Designer clothes replaced her simple wardrobe. Girls' trips became frequent. Dissatisfaction crept in, even with their 7-figure lifestyle. "The Walshes just bought a place in the Hamptons," she'd say at dinner. Or, "Madison Aldridge's family has a jet." Abigail says it's normal. Dominic, whose business thrived on noticing the smallest threats, had missed the one forming at home. Or maybe, he just didn't want to see it. Chapter 2. Cracks in the Facade. The first blow landed on Abigail's 15th birthday. Dominic had promised to help with the party, but a client emergency held him up. When he finally arrived, arms full, custom ice sculpture in hand, the celebration was already underway. Through the window, he saw them, Bryant standing beside Vanessa, his hand resting gently on the small of her back. It wasn't the touch that made Dominic freeze, it was her reaction. She didn't flinch, didn't move away. She leaned in, like it was second nature. He set the sculpture down, heart thudding, watched as Bryant whispered something into Vanessa's ear, and she laughed. That rich, open laugh he hadn't heard in years, not for him. When he stepped inside, her smile wavered, just for a moment. "Then, there you are. We were starting to think you wouldn't show." "You missed the cake," Noah added, a quiet edge in his voice. "I know, buddy. I'm sorry." Dominic reached out, ruffling his son's hair. But Noah pulled away. "It's fine," Abigail muttered, never looking up. Bryant filmed everything, every smile, every toast, every fleeting glance. "You can watch it later," he said casually. "Not Mr. Walsh. Just Bryant." The intimacy wasn't lost on Dominic. He felt stupid. The man of the hour, arriving late to his own daughter's party. Bryant strolled over, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. "Your wife's been holding it down like a pro," he said, handing one to Dominic. "You've got yourself a real treasure here." His gaze slid toward Vanessa with a glint of possession that said more than words ever could. Later, Once the guests were gone and the house was quiet, Dominic found her in their bedroom. She was removing her earrings when he asked, softly, "How long?" She froze, then continued, as if she hadn't heard. "How long what? How long have you been sleeping with Walsh?" The earrings slipped through her fingers, clattering on the floor. "That's ridiculous," she said. "He's our financial advisor. He's married. So are you." Dominic replied, voice low and steady. Vanessa's face tightened. "You're never here, Dominic. You promised me the world. All I got was a husband married to his work. That work pays for everything. This house, your wardrobe, our kids' lives. Money isn't everything. The kids need a father who's present. Don't use them to excuse your affair." The slap came fast. Dominic was faster. He caught her wrist mid-swing, his grip firm but controlled. "Don't," he warned, his voice like ice. "Don't ever try that again." Fear flickered in her eyes, then hardened into rage. "You're hurting me." He released her slowly. "I want him out. Of the company. Of our lives." "Or what?" Vanessa's chin lifted, defiant. "You'll divorce me? Lose half of everything? The kids will hate you for tearing this family apart." Her words cut deep. Dominic had clawed his way up from nothing, brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice. The thought of losing his company, his kids, it was a punch to the gut. Vanessa sensed it. "Bryant says Reeves SEC could be worth 8 figures in 2 years. Divorce me now, and you lose half of that." Dominic looked at the woman standing before him, a stranger in Vanessa's skin. He realized this conversation had been rehearsed, planned, maybe for months. "I need time to think," he said finally. Vanessa smiled, cold and satisfied. "Take all the time you need. But Bryant stays. The kids love him. And in case you forgot, he's doubled our portfolio." That night, Dominic slept alone in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, thoughts spinning. She was right about one thing. A divorce now would ruin everything. But what she didn't know, what she'd never understand, was that Dominic Reeves didn't quit. Not in the rough streets of Philly, not in the worst combat zones, and definitely not in his own home. If life had taught him one thing, it was that patience could be deadlier than rage. So he waited and planned, and one day, they'd both learn what it meant to underestimate him. Chapter 3. The Birthday Surprise. For 2 years, Dominic wore the mask of the clueless husband. He worked longer hours, giving Vanessa and Bryant the stage they craved. He watched from the sidelines as his kids grew distant. Abigail and Noah, now 17, barely looked at him at dinner. They talked about Uncle Bryant, his yacht, his country club, the colleges he'd promised to pull strings for. And Dominic smiled, nodded, waited. His time in security had taught him well. Every person had a flaw. Every lie left a trail. And the truth always surfaced for those patient enough to dig. His 45th birthday dawned on a cool October morning. He didn't expect fanfare. Those days were long gone. But over breakfast, Vanessa surprised him. "We have dinner plans," she said, eyes glued to her phone. "The Plaza Hotel. 7 o'clock. Just family." Dominic studied her. Lately, her contempt had softened, replaced by something like pity. Now he knew why. Her endgame was near. "Special occasion?" he asked lightly. Vanessa finally looked up. Her smile was glossy, insincere. "It's your birthday, isn't it? 45's a milestone." That day, Dominic followed routine until he met with Lawrence Delacroix, a loyal friend, former military, the only one he trusted with the truth. Lawrence slid a flash drive across his desk. "Everything's ready," he said. "You sure about the timing? Once we start, there's no undoing it." Dominic picked up the drive. "I've given them 2 years of freedom. That ends tonight." When Dominic arrived at the Plaza Hotel, the maitre d' led him to a private dining room. Inside, he found Vanessa, the twins, and 2 unexpected guests. Bryant Walsh, of course, and Judge Harold Prescott, a silver-haired man with a reputation for handling high-stakes divorces and close ties to the Aldridge family. "Surprise," Vanessa said flatly. No warmth, just intent. "Hope you don't mind a few extra guests." Dominic gave a tight smile. "Not at all. The more, the merrier." Dinner began with shallow pleasantries. The twins barely spoke to him, their attention locked on Bryant, who regaled them with stories of his new villa in Monaco and an upcoming summer trip. When the main course arrived, Vanessa cleared her throat. "Dominic, I think it's time we stopped pretending." Silence fell. Abigail and Noah glanced at each other, unsurprised. Dominic sliced into his steak. "Pretending what?" that this marriage is working. Vanessa placed a thick envelope beside his plate. These are divorce papers. Judge Prescott has kindly agreed to expedite things. Bryant slid his hand over hers like a man claiming territory. We thought your birthday marked a perfect time, a new beginning for everyone. Dominic opened the envelope, scanning the contents. Brutal. Vanessa would get the house, control of Reeves SEC, full custody of the kids. He'd be left with a token stipend and scraps of visitation. I've been granted everything you own, Vanessa said with a soft laugh. Bryant's legal team got creative with your business contracts, he added, grinning. Dominic looked at his children. And you too? What do you think about all this? Noah stared at his plate. Abigail, ever the bold one, met his eyes. Mom says you've been hiding money, that you never really cared about us. We're changing our last names, Noah said, finally looking up. To Walsh. After the adoption. Don't bother calling, Abigail added, her voice brittle. We're starting over. Bryant already enrolled us at Dalton Prep. Dominic nodded slowly, setting down his silverware. He picked up his water glass, took a slow sip. I understand. He looked at Vanessa, at Bryant, at Judge Prescott. Anything else? Any more birthday surprises? Vanessa blinked, a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. You're not going to fight this? Dominic stood, adjusting his suit. What's there to fight? You've choreographed this beautifully, he said, nodding to the judge. I'll have my lawyer review everything. No need to waste money, Bryant cut in. The prenup gives Vanessa control of any business started during the marriage. Dominic's expression didn't change. I know what I signed. He turned to his children. When you're ready for the truth, you know how to reach me. Vanessa called out as he moved toward the door. Aren't you going to sign? He glanced back. On my birthday? No. But don't worry, you'll get your answers soon. Then he left, saying nothing more. Behind him, he heard Bryant's laugh, the clink of glasses. The celebration had begun. Outside, Lawrence waited in a discreet sedan. How'd it go? Dominic slid into the seat. Exactly as expected. He pulled out his phone and dialed. Mr. Frost? It's time. Deliver the envelope to the Walsh residence. And Lawrence, swing by the house. I want to see their faces when they get the news. As the car cruised through the darkened streets, a cold smile crept across Dominic's face. For 2 years, he'd endured betrayal. For 2 years, he'd built a case, layer by layer, brick by brick. Now, it was time to break theirs. Dominic Reeves didn't forgive. And he never forgot. Chapter 4. The Secret Inheritance. Lawrence's sedan idled near the sprawling Walsh estate, a Georgian colonial that dwarfed the home Dominic had built for his family. From behind tinted glass, Dominic watched as Gerald Frost approached the gate. Sharp suit, sharper mind. Frost had spent the last 18 months preparing for this moment, ever since Dominic confirmed the affair. Vanessa never saw it coming. Neither did Bryant. Because what they didn't know, what their so-called legal experts missed, was that Gerald Frost didn't just specialize in litigation. He was a master of asset protection, and he'd helped Dominic lock down everything they thought they'd just taken. Dominic watched as the security guard took the envelope and disappeared inside. 10 minutes later, his phone buzzed. Delivered. Response as expected. Circle back, Dominic instructed. As Lawrence eased the car around the block, they came into view of the Walsh estate once more. Through the windows, chaos bloomed. People pacing, shouting, gesturing in frantic confusion. Dominic's phone buzzed. Vanessa. He let it ring. Again and again. Aren't you going to answer? Lawrence asked. Not yet, Dominic said, watching the scene unfold. Let them sweat. After the 6th call, he picked up. Yes. What the hell is this? Vanessa's voice cracked with panic. What kind of sick joke are you playing? No joke, Dominic replied calmly. Just information I thought you deserved, before filing the divorce. This can't be real, she stammered. The company, the house, everything. It says it's all owned by a trust. The Reeves family trust, Dominic confirmed. Established 10 years ago, before Reeves SEC took off. That's impossible. I would have known. Would you? He asked, voice cool. You were too busy curating the perfect life, gala to gala, shopping spree to shopping spree. You left the boring parts to Bryant. He says this is fraud, she snapped. Judge Prescott is already looking into nullifying it. Dominic laughed softly. Good luck with that. The trust is based in the Cayman Islands. Secondary structure in Liechtenstein. Judge Prescott's power ends at the border. Her voice cracked again. You can't cut the children off. I haven't, Dominic said evenly. They're still beneficiaries. They'll receive their distributions when they turn 25. A pause. Unless they change their names or get adopted. Then, legally, their inheritance changes. Silence. Then, in a tight, icy whisper, you planned this. No, Dominic said. I plan to protect our family. You plan to dismantle it. The judge will never let this stand. The judge will follow the law. And the law is clear. His voice turned to steel. You wanted a war, Vanessa. Now you've got one. Through the window, Bryant stepped outside, phone glued to his ear, hair tousled, tie loosened, cracks in his perfect image. Your boyfriend looks rattled, Dominic observed. Maybe he's realizing there's no pot of gold waiting for him. You bastard, Vanessa hissed. The kids will never forgive you. They already don't speak to me. That part's done, thanks to you. This isn't over. No, Dominic said. It's just beginning. Enjoy the party. He hung up and turned to Lawrence. Take me home. Lawrence looked at him. The house. Dominic shook his head. That's not home. Not anymore. The penthouse downtown. As the car pulled away from the estate, Dominic felt no elation. No victory. Only purpose. Cold and clear. Phase 1, complete. By morning, Gerald Frost was on the line. They've been scrambling all night, he reported. Bryant's team filed emergency motions to freeze the trust assets. Judge Prescott signed a few, but they're legally meaningless. The trust is untouchable. And Vanessa? She's asking for a meeting. Wants to discuss a reasonable settlement. Dominic gave a thin smile. Set it. My office. 3 o'clock. When Vanessa arrived at Reeves SEC headquarters, she came alone. No entourage. No lawyers. Just her, in that classic navy dress he used to love. Her hair pulled back. Eyes tired. You look exhausted, she offered, settling across from him. Drop the act, Dominic said. What do you want? Her smile faltered. Fine. I want to be reasonable. This trust stunt, it's a tactic. I get it. No, he said. It's a wall. One you can't get over. Everyone has a price, Dominic. What's yours? You still don't get it, he said, leaning forward. This was never about money. Her gaze darkened. Then what? Justice. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. You're punishing the kids for my mistakes. I've punished no one, Dominic said calmly. I've protected what's rightfully theirs, from a man who sees them as nothing more than a shortcut to wealth. Bryant loves them, Vanessa snapped. Bryant loves what they represent. Access to money he didn't earn. Tell me, what happens to that affection when he realizes there's nothing left to gain? Vanessa said nothing. Her silence was confirmation enough. The children remain beneficiaries, Dominic continued. They'll have everything they need, college, careers, a future. But you and Walsh, you get nothing. Her face twisted. So I'm supposed to live on what? Air. You'll receive exactly what the prenup stipulates in the event of infidelity. $300,000. Fair compensation for 12 years and 2 children. Vanessa let out a brittle laugh. You expect me to survive on that? The country club dues alone are half that. Then perhaps it's time to reconsider your priorities. Vanessa stood abruptly, her eyes blazing. You've made a mistake, Dominic. A big one. Bryant has connections you can't even imagine. Threaten me again, Dominic said coolly. And the offer drops to the legal minimum. At the door, she paused. The kids want to know if you'll be at Noah's recital next week. The question caught him off guard. Noah's cello recitals had once been untouchable on his schedule before the invitation stopped. Will I be welcome? He asked quietly. They're still your children, she said, her tone softer now. No matter what's happening between us. Dominic nodded slowly. Then I'll be there. After she left, Lawrence entered. You know it's a setup, right? Of course, Dominic said. But sometimes, you step into the trap to spring a better one. Chapter 5, The Recital Revelation. Boston's Symphony Hall shimmered with old-world grace as Dominic slipped inside, avoiding contact with Vanessa or Bryant. He took his seat just as the lights dimmed. 3 rows ahead, he spotted Vanessa's blonde hair swept into a polished updo. Bryant sat beside her, smug and possessive, arms slung across her chair. On Bryant's other side, Judge Prescott and his wife, flanked by members of the Aldridge family. Boston's elite. A message wrapped in pearls and tuxedos, you're outmatched. Still, when Noah walked onto the stage, All that melted away. Dominic felt a swell of pride. His son had grown. Broader shoulders. Steadier presence. Then he played. Elgar's cello concerto. Rich, mournful, defiant. It echoed through the hall like a quiet rebellion. Emotion poured from each note, the depth of it shocking. This wasn't a boy anymore. During intermission, Dominic stayed in his seat, studying the program. A shadow interrupted the light. "You came, Abigail." "I was invited," he said carefully. She hesitated, then sat beside him. "Mom says you're trying to ruin us. That the trust thing is just to cut her off." "What do you think?" he asked gently. "I think," she stared at her hands. "I think everyone's lying. Mom. Bryant. You. I don't know what's real anymore." For the first time in months, Dominic saw past the cool front, saw his daughter again. "I've never lied to you, Abby. I haven't told you everything, but what I have told you has always been true. Then tell me the truth now. Are you trying to leave us with nothing?" "No," he said firmly. "The trust ensures you and Noah are protected, college, grad school, even startup funds if you want to build something of your own. But it's designed to protect that future from misuse." She looked up. "By Mom." Dominic chose his words carefully. "By anyone who doesn't have your best interests in mind." She studied him, her eyes, so much like his, searching. "Bryant says he's going to adopt us after the divorce. That it'll be better for everyone." The words hurt, but Dominic had expected them. "That's your choice," he said. "But before you decide, you deserve the truth." He reached into his jacket and handed her a small envelope. "Don't open it here. Wait until you're alone." Abigail took the envelope, eyes flickering with uncertainty. "What's in it?" "Something that might explain why your mother and Bryant are in such a rush to finalize this divorce." The lights flickered. Intermission was ending. "I have to go," she said, rising. "Mom will wonder where I am." "Abby," Dominic called softly. She turned. "Whatever happens, whatever you decide, I'll always be your father. That doesn't change." A moment of hesitation, a flash of something, conflict, maybe even care, crossed her face. Then she turned and slipped away. Dominic barely heard the second half of the recital. His mind raced with what-ifs. Did I reach her? Will she read it? Or is Vanessa's grip too strong? As Noah played his final notes, the audience rose in applause. But Dominic wasn't watching the stage anymore. He was watching Abigail. Dominic stood with the rest of the audience, his gaze locked on his son. He willed Noah to meet his eyes, and for a fleeting second, he did. Just a small nod. Subtle. Barely there. But enough. A crack in the wall Vanessa had so carefully constructed. After the recital, Dominic positioned himself near the exit, knowing they'd have to pass by. When Vanessa emerged, flanked by Bryant and the twins, her smile faltered before she smoothed it into place. "Dominic," she said lightly, "I'm glad you came." Her voice held just enough warmth to seem sincere to anyone watching. "Noah was outstanding," Dominic replied, directing his words to his son. "You've come a long way." Before Noah could respond, Bryant stepped in, hand outstretched. "Reeves, good of you to show support, even now." Dominic didn't take the hand. "My relationship with my children is none of your concern, Walsh." Bryant's smile thinned. "That may change soon. The adoption papers are in motion." "Is that so?" Dominic looked past him, catching sight of Judge Prescott chatting with the Aldridge elite. "You sound confident." "The judge is an old friend," Bryant said, voice low. "He knows what's best for the children. And for your portfolio, I imagine." The flicker of rage in Bryant's eyes betrayed him. "For a man about to lose everything, you're surprisingly composed." "I've already lost what matters most," Dominic said, looking at his children. "Everything else is just paperwork." They started to move on, but Abigail hesitated. She lingered for half a second longer than the rest. "Dad," she whispered, "I'll read it tonight." Before he could answer, she was gone, disappearing into the crowd. Outside, Lawrence waited in the car. "Well?" he asked as Dominic slid in. She took the envelope. "And if she does nothing?" Dominic stared out at the Charles River, glowing under the city lights. "Then we move to Plan B. But my daughter is sharper than Vanessa ever gave her credit for. She'll see the truth." At 2 a.m., Dominic's phone rang. "Abigail, I need to see you," she said, voice raw. "Now? Bring the other envelope, the one you mentioned in the note." "Where are you?" "At Layla's. Mom thinks I'm at a sleepover." Layla Martinez, Abigail's best friend since second grade. One of the few relationships Vanessa hadn't poisoned. "I'll be there in 20." When Dominic pulled up, Abigail was already outside, pale in the streetlight, silent. She led him to Layla's father's study, shut the door, and turned to face him. "Is it true?" she demanded. "Everything in those files?" Dominic nodded. "Every word, every number, every account. Bryant's been stealing? From everyone. The Aldridges, a dozen other families. It's a Ponzi scheme. Sophisticated, global. The Aldridges are already nearly bankrupt. They just don't know it yet." Abigail sank into a chair, her hands trembling. "And Mom? Did she know?" Dominic hesitated. "I think she suspected. But Bryant kept her comfortable, insulated, distracted." Abigail looked up. "The adoption. The rush to get divorced. It's all about the trust, isn't it?" "Yes. Bryant needs money. The SEC is closing in. He just doesn't know how fast. If he adopted you and Noah, he could petition for access to your trust distributions as your guardian." Abigail wiped at her eyes. "We were his backup plan. His safety net," Dominic said gently. "And your mother was complicit, whether she admits it or not." "What about Noah?" she asked. "He doesn't know?" "Not yet. I was hoping you'd help me tell him." Abigail stood, pacing the room. Her face, his face, hardened with resolve. "I'll talk to him. He's at the lake house, but I'll get there. Be careful." Her voice was steady now. "What happens when the SEC moves? If your mother cooperates, I've arranged immunity for her. But it has to be voluntary. Before the arrests." "She won't," Abigail said flatly. "She's too far gone. Then she'll face what comes next." Abigail nodded slowly. "This will ruin everything. Our home, our school, our lives. Your home is secure. Your education's protected. And your real friends, your true friends, they'll still be there. The rest? Let them fall away." For a moment, the fight left her. Then she straightened, fierce again. "I'll talk to Noah tonight." A pause. "And if I can, I'll talk to Mom." Dominic placed a hand on her shoulder. "I'm proud of you." She didn't speak, but she didn't pull away. It was more than enough. "Don't let Bryant suspect anything." "I won't." Abigail hesitated, then stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, tight. The hug caught Dominic off guard, raw and real, the first honest contact they'd shared in years. "I'm sorry, Dad," she whispered. "For everything I said. For believing the worst." Dominic held her close. "You have nothing to be sorry for. You were manipulated by professionals." As she stepped back, her face was solemn. "What happens now? After I talk to Noah? That depends on what you both want. I won't force your hand. And Mom." His expression hardened. "Your mother made her choice the day she turned her back on us. My only priority now is protecting you and your brother from what's coming." Chapter 6. The Gathering Storm. 3 days after the recital, Dominic's phone buzzed with a message that made him pause. "Need to talk. Alone. The boathouse. 2 p.m. Noah." The boathouse on the Charles, where father and son had once spent countless weekends. Dominic teaching him to row, to listen to the rhythm of water and wind, to find calm in the repetition of motion. Dominic arrived early, watching rowers from nearby colleges cut through the current in sleek shells. When Noah finally approached, shoulders hunched, jaw set, Dominic saw the boy he'd raised beneath the guarded exterior. "You came alone?" Noah asked, eyes scanning the area. As requested, Dominic gestured to a bench overlooking the river. "Shall we sit?" Noah stayed standing. "Abby showed me the files. Everything about Bryant. The fraud. The trust. And is it all true?" "Every word." Noah's facade cracked. "Why didn't you tell us sooner? Why let us think? Would you have believed me?" Dominic asked quietly. "Or would you have thought it was just another attempt to turn you against your mother and Bryant?" Noah didn't answer. He didn't have to. "He's been asking a lot of questions," Noah said at last. "About the trust. About accessing money early. Keeps saying we need to finalize the adoption before the divorce is done." "And what do you think now?" Noah's laugh was hollow. "I think I was an idiot. We both were. He didn't care about us, just the money. People reveal who they are when money's involved. And power." Noah looked away. "And Mom?" She had to know. Something. Dominic chose his next words carefully. She knew what she wanted: comfort, status. Bryant gave her that. It's easy not to question when you're enjoying the benefits. Noah sighed. "She's still our mom." "Yes. And that won't change, no matter what happens." Finally, Noah sank onto the bench. "So what now?" Abby's right. The SEC is moving in soon. Tuesday was the plan, but they may go earlier. Charges include securities fraud, wire fraud, laundering. He won't be getting out anytime soon. And Mom, her future depends on the decisions she makes now. If she cooperates, she might avoid prosecution. Noah stared at the water. She won't. She's too proud. Then she'll face what comes. And us? Me and Abby. You're always welcome home. The house was never not yours. The trust ensures that. And if we stay with Mom? Dominic's heart clenched, but his voice didn't waver. Then that's your decision. The trust still provides for you, your education, your needs. But I won't force you to choose me. Noah was quiet for a long moment. I need time. To think. Talk to Abby. Of course. Dominic reached into his coat and held out a small key. The lake cabin in New Hampshire. It's off-grid. Not in my name. If things get overwhelming, you and Abby can go there. It's stocked. Safe. Noah took the key, his fingers turning it over slowly. You really planned this all out. I've had 2 years. As he stood, Noah paused. The piece I played at the recital, it was your favorite. Elgar. Dominic's throat tightened. He nodded, unable to speak. Then Noah walked away, his silhouette shrinking into the mist along the riverbank. That night, Dominic's phone rang. The SEC's moving up, Lawrence said. They're going in tomorrow morning. What? What? Tip off. Someone warned one of Bryant's associates. They're worried about documents being destroyed, money vanishing. Damn it. Dominic's voice was sharp. The kids. They need to be out of the blast radius. Already handled, Lawrence said. Gerald secured an emergency custody order. You've got temporary guardianship until the investigation's complete. Dominic crouched at Noah's door, lockpick in hand. Seconds later, the bolt gave way with a soft click. Inside, his son was pacing, tense, fists clenched. He froze when Dominic entered, then surged forward. Dad, thank God. He gripped Dominic's shoulder, breath shaky. I didn't know if the message got through. You did good, Noah. We're getting you both out. They've been yelling all day. Bryant's furious. Something about frozen accounts, canceled wires. I know, Dominic said. The SEC made their move. He's cornered, and that makes him dangerous. Noah nodded grimly. Let's go. Back in Abigail's room, Lawrence was already at the window, scanning the perimeter through a thermal scope. Yacht's prepping at the marina. We've got about 15 minutes before they realize the kids are gone. Then we move now, Dominic said. They took the service stairwell 2 floors down, exiting through a rarely used maintenance corridor that led directly to the underground parking garage. Ramon's team had already secured a vehicle, unmarked, fast, and clean. As they pulled away from the condo complex, headlights flashed behind them. They're on to us, Lawrence warned, checking the mirror. Keep driving, Dominic ordered. He turned to his kids. Stay down. 2 SUVs gave chase, sleek and black, likely Walsh's private security. Lawrence veered onto a side road, weaving through narrow coastal lanes, tires screeching. Dominic loaded a compact Glock from the duffel, eyes scanning ahead. We're not going to outrun them, Lawrence muttered. Too much horsepower. Then we don't try. Dominic pointed to a break in the trees. Turn off here now. Lawrence jerked the wheel, the SUV plunging into dense underbrush toward an old utility trail. Behind them, the pursuing vehicles hesitated, then followed. Dominic reached into the glove box, pulled out a small remote, and hit a switch. What's that? Abigail asked. Fail-safe, Dominic said. Ramon's team rigged the trail with proximity mines. No fatalities, just immobilization. Seconds later, a sharp crack shattered the night, followed by screeching tires and the crunch of metal against stone. Pursuit neutralized, Lawrence confirmed, eyes never leaving the road. We're clear. An hour later, they reached the safe house, an isolated villa nestled among the inland pine groves of western Nassau, owned under a shell company linked to Reeves SEC. Inside, local security swept for trackers while Dominic debriefed Ramon and secured encrypted communication lines to both the SEC and U.S. Embassy. With Abigail and Noah finally safe, the weight Dominic had carried for 2 years began to lift, slowly, cautiously. But this wasn't over. Not yet. Bryant and Vanessa would wake to empty rooms and frozen fortunes. And the storm they'd unleashed was only just beginning. Bryant lunged toward the painting in a blind panic, ripping it from the wall, only to find the safe already ajar, its contents emptied. You mean these? Dominic held up the bundle of passports between 2 fingers, letting them fall to the floor. You're not as clever as you think. Vanessa stared at him, her voice shaking. You don't have to do this. Let the authorities. I am letting the authorities, Dominic said coldly. But not before I ensure my children are safe from either of you ever touching their lives again. Bryant moved again, this time slower, calculating, but Dominic was faster. A brutal elbow to the solar plexus dropped him to the carpet, gasping. Stay down, Dominic growled. He turned to Vanessa. You let him drug our son. You watched him try to manipulate Abby. You stood there while he plotted to rob your children of their future. I didn't know, she began. You chose not to know. His words were sharper than any blade. Because ignorance was easier than admitting who you'd become. Outside, tires screeched. Flashlights danced against the curtains. The authorities had arrived. Dominic stepped back from the chaos he'd just ignited, letting it unfold. Good luck explaining all of this, he said as he turned to leave. I suggest you lawyer up, both of you. Vanessa's expression cracked as officers poured into the suite, shouting commands in rapid Bahamian English. Bryant screamed something about diplomatic immunity before he was cuffed and dragged to his knees. Dominic didn't watch. He was already gone, slipping into the night with the ease of a man who had once lived in shadows. He had a flight to catch, and 2 children waiting for him in Key West. Dominic nodded toward the massive abstract canvas dominating one wall. You really should vary your hiding spots, Bryant. Same safe layout in every property. Amateur move. Vanessa's eyes flicked between them, fear shifting to calculation. What do you want, Dominic? There must be something we can offer, some arrangement. Did you know he drugged our son? Dominic asked, voice low, dangerous. Did you approve that? She hesitated, just a second too long. Of course not. I would never. Don't lie to me. Dominic snapped, his composure fracturing. Not now? Not after everything. Vanessa and Bryant flinched as the weight of his fury filled the room. With visible effort, Dominic steadied himself. Here's what happens next. The authorities will arrest Bryant for embezzlement, fraud, attempted kidnapping, drugging a minor. He turned to Vanessa. You still have a choice. Her voice was barely a whisper. What choice? Cooperation or complicity? The SEC and FBI have more than enough to charge you. But if you testify, if you give them everything, they might offer immunity. Bryant laughed, a short, bitter bark. She won't testify. She can't. Every dollar she spent, the designer clothes, the trips, the parties, was bought with stolen money. Is that true? Dominic asked, his eyes locking onto Vanessa. She looked away. I didn't know the details. I just didn't ask questions when I should have. And now our kids have paid the price for your silence. Outside, sirens howled. Closer now. You have 2 minutes, Dominic said. Choose. Suddenly, Bryant lunged, yanking open the nightstand drawer and pulling out a pistol. Nobody's choosing anything, he barked, the gun jerking between them. We're leaving. All of us. Bryant, please. Vanessa reached for him, trembling. You're making it worse. His laugh was wild, broken. Worse? I'm looking at 30 years in a federal cell. There is no worse. There's always worse, Dominic said softly, unmoving. Prison is time. Death's forever. The certainty in his voice, calm, unblinking, shook Bryant. His hand wavered. You wouldn't, Bryant spat. I've killed before, Dominic said. In uniform. For less. Then came the crash. The front door exploded inward, followed by a flood of shouting. Guns drawn, orders barked in 2 languages. Bryant spun toward the noise, guns still raised. 2 shots. A flash. A thud. Bryant collapsed, blood soaking his silk pajamas. The chaos blurred, Dominic tackled by a uniformed officer, then cuffed and seated alongside Vanessa in the living room. FBI agents moved swiftly through the condo, cataloging evidence, confirming identities. A senior agent approached. Mr. Reeves? Yes. We need to ask you about your presence here tonight. I came for my children. They were being taken out of the country against their will. We've confirmed that, the agent said, flipping through notes. Your associate, Mr. Delacroix, gave us a full statement. Your children are safe, under protection at the U.S. consulate. Dominic nodded, relieved but numb. The agent turned to Vanessa. And Mrs. Reeves, your cooperation will determine your future. We have extensive evidence tying you to Mr. Walsh's schemes. It's your call now. Vanessa looked over at Dominic, pale and shaking. I didn't know about Noah. I swear. Bryant said it was just something to help him sleep. But you knew about the rest, Dominic said flatly. The fraud, the money, the plan to take the kids. She hesitated, then gave the faintest of nods. Yes, not all of it, but enough. An agent uncuffed Dominic. He stood slowly, gaze lingering on Vanessa for one final moment. Then you've made your choice. He turned toward the door. Dominic, wait, she called out. The children. Will you tell them? I'm sorry. Dominic paused, hand on the door, but didn't turn back. They're old enough to decide what your apology is worth. I won't tell them what to believe. Then he walked out, into the hallway, into the night, toward freedom, toward his children, and left her behind. Dominic nodded. Reeves SEC remains intact. It was always held separately from the trust, protected under corporate layers Bryant never managed to unravel. He looked between his children, both now seated at the table, older than they had been just days ago. Not in age, but in the quiet, weighty understanding now reflected in their eyes. The company's still mine, he continued. It survived the storm. And so did we. Noah's jaw tensed. I don't want anything from that trust. Not until I've earned it. Dominic's smile was tired, but proud. You already have. But if you want to forge your own path first, I'll support that. And me? Abigail asked. What if I want to use it? For school. For something that matters. Then that's exactly what it's there for. Silence settled briefly over the kitchen, the kind of silence that follows chaos. Not empty, but full. Of healing, of new beginnings. Lawrence will stay on a few more days, Dominic said. Help finalize the details, handle the fallout. But after that, he hesitated. We go home? Abigail asked. Dominic met her gaze. If that's what you want. Or we start over. New city, new school, fresh ground, free of shadows. Noah looked at Abigail. Somewhere we choose for ourselves. Abigail nodded slowly. Yeah, that sounds right. Outside, the sun was rising, casting golden light over the tiled courtyard. Birds chirped softly through jasmine-scented air. A new day, a new life. And for the first time in a very long time, Dominic Reeves allowed himself to believe they might just find peace. Not in the wealth he'd built, not in the power he'd protected, but in the fragile, beautiful chance to rebuild what truly mattered. Together, silence hung heavy on the line. Vanessa's voice, when it returned, was barely more than a whisper. I didn't know he was capable of going that far. I thought we were just starting over. You were starting over, Abigail said, voice brittle. Without us. I was scared, Vanessa said, the control slipping. Everything was falling apart. And You ran, Noah said. You ran and tried to take us with you like we were luggage. I'm still your mother, she said, more desperate now. I know I've made mistakes. Terrible ones. But I love you both. I always have. That love didn't stop you from choosing a man like Bryant, Abigail replied. From lying. From standing by while he hurt us. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Vanessa said, finally dropping the facade. I don't want to lose you. Dominic's voice cut through. Calm. Final. You already have, Vanessa. Whether that becomes permanent depends on the choices you make moving forward. What does that mean? She asked raw. It means your children may someday choose to speak to you again. Or they may not. That's no longer up to me. It's up to them. And it will depend entirely on your honesty, your actions, and whether you do the hard work of taking responsibility. Another long pause. Then Vanessa said, quietly, I'll be in touch through Gerald Frost. If they're ready. We'll consider it, Abigail said, emotion finally cracking through. But don't expect us to pretend nothing happened. I won't, Vanessa whispered. Goodbye for now. The call ended. For a while, no one spoke. Finally, Dominic looked at his children. You didn't have to hear that, but I'm glad you did. We needed to, Noah said, to see if there was anything real left. And was there? Dominic asked. Abigail looked at her brother, then back at their father. Maybe, but it's going to take a long time to matter again. Dominic nodded. Then we'll take that time. Together. As they stood from the table, the early morning light flooded the room. Bright, unfiltered, unflinching. The storm had passed. The damage remained. But so did the possibility of rebuilding. Stronger, wiser, and, for the first time in a long while, together. Dominic leaned back in his chair, the shadows under his eyes deeper than before. Your mother's last card was desperation. She has nothing left but half-truths and veiled threats. Abigail folded her arms. So even if she went public, she wouldn't get far, Dominic said. And any leak of classified material would draw attention she doesn't want. The agencies involved would shut it down before her story reached daylight. Noah looked down at the table, fingers drumming a quiet rhythm. It's just wild. Everything we thought was real wasn't. Not everything, Dominic said gently. You still have each other. You still have me. And from this point on, you'll have the truth. Abigail's voice was soft but steady. Even if the truth's messy, Dominic met her gaze. Especially then. For a moment, the room held that fragile stillness that comes not from peace, but from the hard-won clarity that follows a storm. The moment when wounds are no longer bleeding, just beginning to scar. I don't hate her, Noah said finally. But I don't trust her either. That's fair, Dominic replied. And that line between love and trust, that's yours to navigate. No one else's. Abigail looked at the phone, now silent and dark on the table. Do you think she meant it? About wanting to see us again? Dominic gave a small, weary nod. I think she wants what she lost. But wanting something doesn't make you ready to have it again. Abigail exhaled slowly. Then we wait. On our terms. Dominic smiled faintly. Exactly. The front door creaked open as Lawrence returned, a thin folder in hand. Flights are arranged. Private jet to Montana departs at noon tomorrow. The safe house there is stocked. It's quiet, secure, and far from all this. Perfect, Dominic said. He looked back at his children. You ready to start over? They didn't hesitate. Yeah, Noah said. Together, Abigail added. And for the first time in a long while, the future didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like a blank page, one they would fill on their own terms. This was delivered to my office 2 days ago, Lawrence explained, handing the envelope to Dominic. Postmarked from Nassau. No return address, but I had it checked. No threats, no surveillance. Just this. Dominic turned the envelope over in his hands, the weight of it more emotional than physical. The handwriting on the front was unfamiliar. He broke the seal carefully. Inside were 2 items, a handwritten letter on thick stationery and a smaller envelope labeled for Abigail and Noah in Vanessa's familiar cursive. Dominic scanned the letter quickly, his expression unreadable. Then he passed the smaller envelope to his children. This is for you. Abigail opened it, unfolding the note within. She read aloud. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to understand. Not to excuse, only to explain. I was weak. I was afraid. I mistook luxury for safety and control for love. Bryant used that. I let him. And I let you down. You're old enough now to decide what kind of relationship you want with me. But know this. I was proud of you, even when I didn't say it. Especially then. I hope one day, when you've lived more life, you'll understand the ways we fail the people we love. And maybe, you'll let me try to be something more than your greatest mistake. Mom. Noah sat back, eyes distant. Abigail folded the letter carefully, her expression unreadable. Lawrence cleared his throat. There's more, he said to Dominic. Attached to the back of her letter was a legal directive. Vanessa has requested that, upon her release, all remaining personal assets under her control be signed over to a trust, one managed by you, for the twins. Dominic blinked. She signed them over? Everything, Lawrence confirmed. Residual investments, properties, a modest fund from what she earned legally before the Walsh years. Not much, but intentional. Abigail said nothing. She simply stood, stepped off the porch, and stared out at the mountains. Noah looked at his father. Do you believe her? Dominic watched his daughter, then turned back to his son. I believe she regrets. I don't know if she's changed. Noah nodded slowly. But at least now, she's not running. Abigail turned back toward them. We'll see her. Dominic raised an eyebrow. Not today, not tomorrow, but when we're ready. On our terms. Dominic smiled softly. That's all I ever wanted for you both. They stood together on the porch, the 3 of them, the rebuilt family, watching as the Montana wind swept through the trees and the sun climbed higher over the mountains. Not everything had been healed, but everything had been faced. And for the first time in years, there were no more secrets. Dominic nodded slowly, his gaze drifting out across the golden plains beyond the porch. Understanding doesn't mean excusing, but it can make room for compassion. Abigail folded her arms, the file resting in her lap. She was used, just like we were. And maybe that's the part one couldn't see before. I thought she chose all of it. Bryant. the lies, leaving us. She chose some of it, Noah said. But she wasn't in control the way we thought. She was caught in a web, Dominic added, spun by men with power and old grudges. And by the time she realized it, she'd already betrayed too much to turn back. Lawrence stood silently, arms crossed, as if guarding not just the house, but the moment itself. Noah picked up the USB drive. We can give this to the authorities. Let them file it away, bury it in some classified vault. Or we can burn it, Abigail said. Let it die with the men who started it. Dominic looked at his children. Or we can keep it, as a reminder that the truth always surfaces, no matter how deep someone tries to bury it. Noah turned the small device over in his hand, then set it gently on the table. Let's keep it, not to dwell, but to remember. Abigail nodded. Agreed. They sat in silence for a while longer, the wind stirring the dry leaves in the trees, the Montana sun inching lower on the horizon. Dominic looked at his children, older now, scarred and wiser, but unbroken. We move forward, he said. Not with revenge, not with bitterness, but with clarity. He picked up his coffee, now cold, and raised it slightly in a silent toast. To truth, to resilience, to the future we build ourselves. Abigail and Noah clinked their mugs against his. And just like that, the past was not undone, but it was no longer their prison. It was simply what it was, a truth acknowledged, a chapter closed. The rest of their story, at last, was theirs to write. Noah's voice was steady. I want to see her when she's released. Not to forget, not to pretend it didn't happen, but to talk, with this new context. Dominic nodded, quietly respecting his son's resolve. Then we'll make that happen. He glanced at the USB drive still resting on the table. And Victor Aldridge? The man who orchestrated all of this. What about him? Lawrence's expression darkened. He's lost everything. The scandal burned through his name, his money, everything. His revenge cost him his legacy, Dominic added. His son is gone. His family fractured. His power evaporated. Is that enough? Abigail asked softly. After everything he tried to do to us? Dominic looked at her, the strength in her eyes, the fire she'd honed into something steady. What are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm asking what you think. It was a defining moment. Not just about justice, but about legacy and what he would pass down to his children beyond trust funds and training. 5 years ago, he might have pursued Aldrich, crushed what was left. But now, he's suffered the consequences of his own hatred, Dominic said. I regret what happened to his son, even if the decision I made saved lives. But Aldrich tried to destroy a family that had nothing to do with that loss. And now he's destroyed his own. So we do nothing? Noah asked, eyebrows raised. We live, Dominic said quietly. We thrive. We rise from the wreckage and build something greater. That's our answer. Abigail took her father's hand. That's the best revenge, isn't it? Showing the world they failed. Exactly, Dominic said. It's not quite forgiveness. It's something stronger. Power reclaimed. Peace chosen. Noah nodded. So, when Mom is released, we all go together? Dominic surprised even himself with the certainty in his voice. Yes, we'll meet her, show her what we know. And from there, each of us can decide what comes next. Even you? Abigail asked. Dominic's gaze didn't waver. I'll never trust her again. But I won't carry the weight of hating her either. That's not living. That's surviving. Lawrence, quiet until now, finally spoke. What about the judge's confession? Make it public. Dominic shook his head. No, let that die with him. The Aldridge family has already paid a steep price. No need to humiliate those who were just as used as Vanessa. Lawrence nodded and left them with a promise to return by dinner. And so they stayed, father and children, sitting on a weathered porch as the mountains caught the sunlight and held it. The secrets of the past no longer held them captive. The path forward wasn't perfect, but it was real, and there's alone to walk. Happy birthday, Dad, Noah said again, quieter this time. Dominic smiled, the kind that came from deep within. This feels like the beginning. They watched the sky, together, not as victims of betrayal, but as authors of a new story. A story of choice, of truth, of family. This is where our story ends. If it moved you, share your thoughts in the comments. If you'd like more, subscribe to the channel. Click the video on your screen, and I'll meet you there.